welcome to BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. This is our Gem of All Mechanisms podcast. I'm Brian Runciman, and for the first time in A as well as V, or V as well as A, should I say. And today we've got a really good guest. It's Jimmy Wowes, the founder of Wikipedia. So first of all, can I say hello, Jimmy, and welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
That's excellent. So we actually interviewed you the last time in 2010. So it seems like we've left a little bit of a long gap there. So
not much has happened in technology since then.
No, absolutely no. Notoriously slow moving, so we don't need to worry too much. I mean, you've been going for 22 years now, 2001, isn't it? I think. So in fact, our last talk to you was closer to the start of Wikipedia than now.
Yes.
So
yes.
We've been remiss there, so apologies. But just to pick up on something you said to us back then in 2010, you said that Wikipedia at the time was pretty good in parts, and I think it might have got a bit better since then. What's your view now?
It's pretty good in parts, and yeah, I think it has gotten a bit better since then. We always try to be, very humble about Wikipedia. It isn't perfect, but it's pretty good, and we try really hard to make it as good as we possibly can, which is, as it turns out, quite important in the world. And I think that's the nature of doing high quality reference material for a general audience. Is it's actually quite hard to get everything right, and we do our best.
So since 2010, of course, we've had so many things happen politically. The political situation's got a lot more divisive. We've of course had the COVID as well. So I'm just wondering now how you feel about fake news. I think maybe you view yourself as sort of front line, maybe in the war against fake news.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely do. In a sense, certainly. We try to be a place that people can come to that's a better alternative than a lot of random low quality information sources. And we still have a huge problem online with fake news or extremely biased sources and things like that. In terms of being on the front line makes it sound like that we're doing battle with that sort of thing every day, but we sort of aren't. We sort of are and we sort of aren't. And the truth is that sort of the flood of misinformation, disinformation hasn't really impacted Wikipedia too strongly, just because our community is quite fierce about it. And so we don't have huge sort of complicated debates internally about nonsense. We just say it's nonsense and it's published in bad places, and so therefore we just ignore it. And so if you come to Wikipedia to try to put in your, I don't know, what would it be these days, your Dr. Fauci conspiracy theory or whatever, you're not going to get very far. It's just going to get reverted very quickly. And then I hope if you come and you want to put in your thoughtful criticism of Dr. Fauci information that's sourced to reliable sources, yeah, great, that's good. Like we're not here to push any particular agenda, and to the extent that there are legitimate debates, and of course there often are, we want to not take one side or the other in those debates.
So I seem to remember your mantra being, or your principle being, more about verifiability than truth as such. Is that still the way you view things?
Well, I mean, there was an expression in our policy pages at one point that I think leaned too heavily on that concept. And I think it's been rewritten now to move those two words further apart, because verifiability, not truth, doesn't sound right to me. We want everything in Wikipedia to be true, and we want everything to be verifiable. And so putting those in tension with each other, I think, is something of a mistake. The only way as humans we can get to the truth is by very thoughtfully considering a wide range of verifiable information. The point of that was really to say, look, we're not in a position as Wikipedians to judge for all humankind what is the truth with a capital T on every subject. So it's much easier for us to say, okay, look, we are gonna help decide what counts as a reliable source. We actually are quite good at that. And we're going to thoughtfully chew through that. And then we're going to refer to those reliable sources as much as possible. And if those reliable sources are in conflict, great, that's fine. We're Wikipedians like that. We write up both sides and we try to explain what the debate is about. And so that's what that concept means. And it's in no way skepticism about the existence of truth or the desirability of truth.
I would look at it myself and perhaps say that you're quite good at giving nuance to conversations because of the sheer breadth of the references you can put in that you have. And one of the problems you've had at BCS is that nuance tends to get left out of conversations. AI is either a terminator or it's just a little program to do your job.
Right.
Is that how you view it? That you get the nuance into the conversation?
Yeah, and I think we, that's a really core part of our spirit of how we do things, and of course, that's true of almost every area of human knowledge. I mean, certainly it's true of contentious areas, but even in areas that aren't particularly controversial to most people at all, there's still often going to be, more than one take, more than one sort of perspectives, and to be able to approach that and explain it in a nuanced way, I think is really really valuable, and it's what you want ultimately from an encyclopedia. I don't go to an encyclopedia to be told one side of the story. I also don't come to an encyclopedia to hear every possible random idea anybody might have. But in the middle area where there's there's actually legitimate debate on this topic, and therefore we should cover that legitimate debate.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It put me immediately in mind when I was just reading up before talking to you today about the fact that Apple TV have recently done a huge version of Asimov's Foundation, haven't they? Which is about the library, the huge,
All right, yes.
Encyclopedists they're called, aren't they? It seems like it might be a version of that.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting because there's also the Douglas Adams series that has an Encyclopedia Galactica. Yes,
indeed. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Lovely. So I remember a few years back, you were, it seemed like you were losing some of your editors. That seems to be all stabilized now. How's the community working from your point of view? 22 years in now, so it's obviously sustainable.
Yeah. So I would say we had a decline from the absolute peak, which was in I think 2007, around that. And then it's stabilized soon after. I would say since 2010, it's been relatively stable. Right. Some ups and some downs over the years, just depending. But it's not in any kind of terminal decline or anything like that. And I think one of the reasons, possibly the main reason for that, is during that first big flurry of activity culminating in 2007, it was still pretty easy to start a Wikipedia entry about a topic that's clearly belongs in the encyclopedia. So, almost any town in the world that you can think of today is already in Wikipedia. Almost any well-known author, scientist, chemical, all kinds of things are really already in Wikipedia and oftentimes quite impressive. So I actually remember once a long time ago, I had just come to the UK, so it must have been around 2010. And I was telling my partner, now my wife, we were dating at the time, about the governor, George Wallace from Alabama, where I grew up, who was very famous in the US as a racist governor of Alabama who ran for president, and he was shot and paralyzed, and later went on in life to win an election as governor of Alabama with the majority of the black vote, which is quite shocking given that he was overtly segregationist at an earlier stage. So he's an interesting politician, and I would say definitely a bad guy, but an interesting story. And so I was telling her all about him, and I thought, oh, you know what? I know a lot about this. I grew up in Alabama. I'm going to go and see if there's anything I can add to the Wikipedia entry. And even then, in 2010, it was like, wow, this is really good. It's really long. It's really comprehensive. It's got dozens, hundreds of sources, and I've learned a lot from it that I didn't even know myself, even though I thought I knew the topic. And so you can imagine there would have been a time when you would have been that first person to type George Wallace was a governor in Alabama and hit save, and it's not much, but you could get started. So when it became a lot harder to contribute because a lot of the work was already done and it's more and more obscure topics, I'd say we lost some level of casual contributors, and it was really people who are massively into it, and that kind of carries on today.
Do you think part of the motivation is that people are more and more seized by the importance of getting things to be accurate? I mean, at BCS, we're very much about the ethics of things, and we're very interested in that particular area. Do you think that's a motivating force, or do people just like telling other people things?
Yeah, no, I think it is a key it's a key point of pride for the community and a key motivation. I mean, I think we're all aware that in the world, we will collectively make very bad decisions if we don't have the facts. It's not possible to make good decisions if you don't understand what's going on. And we know that in many cases, we have world leaders who are often quite loose with their connection to reality and the facts, and that's important. We have, no names. I wouldn't mention Donald Trump if you asked me to. So, oh, sorry, yeah, no. But if when you look at that sort of thing, people do really sense that, okay, wow, like actually there are facts, and they're not particularly difficult or hard to get at, and a lot of people don't know them. And it's really important that we write in a clear way, that we justify what we're saying and so forth. I mean, the classic kind of simple example is, when I'll just go with the example since I've mentioned Donald Trump, but, when he claimed that, Mexico was sending rapists and murderers, not good people, and that's who were the migrants, well, that just isn't true. Like the crime rate of people who are in the US illegally, without proper papers is very, very low. It's lower than police officers, as it turns out. And that's another political comment on the crime rate of police officers. And so that's just a fact. Like that's a simple fact. You can still take whatever position on immigration that you want and say, I think we should allow more, we should allow less, we should really crack down on people coming in, without proper visa. Fine, but you can't really do that by claiming that it's murderers and rapists coming in. That's just not true. And that's really important. And obviously that same sort of issue is, the same sort of issue, not immigration, but the same sort of issue of political matters being decided on emotional claims that aren't actually factual is a problem everywhere, in all kinds of areas.
Absolutely. I'd be interested in your view as to the way things are progressing too, in terms of your funding as an organization. You've always had a very laudable, in my view, laudable approach. We won't take sponsorship and that kind of thing. Again, you've been going 22 years. Is that a stable thing? Is that something you still need to be concerned about?
Well, what I say is we always have to take it very seriously. We can't say, oh, it's all fine, don't worry, because as soon as people stop worrying, it won't be all fine. But our model's been very successful. I mean, the public supports us, very widely. I mean, the vast majority of the money that supports Wikipedia is from the small donors. Okay. And we think that's really important in terms of our intellectual independence. Not that we're against rich people giving us money, that's great too, or foundations or what have you. But I think it's really important that small donor model is very powerful. And the way we run the organization, we tend to be very conservative about spending. And so every year we bring in more than we spend, and we add to our reserve. We've launched a separate endowment fund where we raise money, and this is the main target for the endowment fund is foundations and high net worth individuals, doing larger gifts. And that works out well because they are often more interested in thinking about the long run than funding the annual budget. And they're happy that we're stable. And so they think, okay, the endowment fund sounds like a great idea for that. So we've raised about 100 million so far, and we're just starting our second tranche and our second campaign to raise the second 100 million. And the purpose of that is to have a base of money in case of any future dire emergencies or excellent opportunities. But also, we've just started doing some grants. I mean, largely we plan to continue to grow the endowment and not spend it. But we are now making some grants, and the grants that we're doing, and I say we because there's two boards. There's the Wikimedia Foundation board and the endowment board. I sit on both. So we, the endowment board, are looking to fund things that are really long-term focused, really thinking about technology, technical innovation for the future. So we're funding the machine learning team at the foundation, things like that, to sort of think about the impact of AI and work on new tools for the community that would be a little outside of the scope of keeping the website running and making it nice. So
sure. It must be, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but having a large number of smaller contributors must make you feel quite good about the product, as it were, to use it.
Yeah. No, I think it's good, and it's really important. And I think, one of the things that means for the organization is that we have to care about readers in a really strong way, because the readers are the ones who are paying for it by their voluntary donations.
Sure.
And that really matters. And I think it would be easy, because you know how organizations are, no matter what ideals they may have, it's very common for organizations to just follow the money. And so if all of your funding, sometimes people say to me, why don't you, why are you asking all these people for donations on the website all the time? You should just get Apple and Google and Facebook to pay for it. And I'm sure we probably could take a lot of arm twisting and some concessions. I mean, I think, even though, among those companies, I think they do, love Wikipedia and want to support it. Why not? But that's what I say to people is like, think about that. I really like that Wikipedia is funded by the public. It really insulates us against a lot of potential pressures from large donors and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I mean, I use, like I bet most people do, bits and bobs on Wikipedia almost every single day, but I would imagine it's probably come back into people's minds a little bit more recently when they've started just playing ChatGPT and Bard. How are you feeling about being one of the sort of main contributors to that?
Well, I mean, all of our content is freely available for people to take and reuse in any way that they want. I'm quite excited about the possibilities. I would love it if they would figure out how to be a little bit better about referencing, i.e. telling people when they got the information from Wikipedia, although I do concede that's actually quite hard to do given the way that technology works. And then there's also the enormous problem of accuracy and what they call hallucinations, which, it's quite bad. And, it limits the ability to use ChatGPT for certain kinds of things, just because it isn't yet reliable enough. It just makes up random stuff sometimes, and that's kind of annoying.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. Well, now, one thing that BCS are quite keen on, we've been talking about for many years, is professionalism in the IT community, being accountable, being responsible, and so on. I just wonder what your take on that might be. I would imagine this would be quite important to your organization, Jimmy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of what we do and the way we think about things is what I'd say is an accountability model rather than a gatekeeper model.
Right.
So in a gatekeeper model, we would vet everybody up front and make sure that they're a qualified professor or whatever it might be before we let them touch anything. Whereas the accountability model is more, everything, what you're doing is transparent. Other people can see the work you've done. It's tied to your account. And if you're not doing the right thing, people are going to notice and they're going to be able to call you out on it. And potentially you can get blocked if you're misbehaving or making stuff up and so forth. And so that idea of accountability versus gatekeeping, I think, has broader applicability. And I would say particularly in the IT sector, where a great many of the really fantastic programmers working in the field aren't academics. They're like, it's a very accessible career to anyone who wants to turn in and teach themselves how to be a great programmer. particularly these days, all the incredible online resources that make it possible to do that. And so it really isn't a gatekeeping model. You can't say, well, you have to pass this series of exams to become a doctor, and there's a licensing board. We just don't have that, nor should we, in my opinion, in our field. But that does mean you've got to sort of say, okay, well, what are the mechanisms for accountability and transparency and responsibility? That's really powerful, to say, don't write code that breaks democracy, for example, would be a hot topic these days. Yeah.
Yeah. We're speaking about 3 weeks after that general letter came out from the Life Institute about we should pause AI development. BCS have given a response on that, saying that that pause is not reasonable, but that the accountability of those that work in it is the thing that counts. Would that be a similar take to yours?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I definitely think a pause is just not plausible. There's so much going on. And in fact, I think a lot of people in the general public may not realize how much is open source and out there, and people are doing all kinds of experiments and so forth. So yes, of course, you've got your huge companies with vast resources. So you've got OpenAI and Google and Microsoft, Bing, and so on. But you've also got tens of I mean, I can't even estimate the numbers of people who have downloaded software. They're downloading images and creating AI image creation, or they're experimenting with large language models with smaller data sets, of course, than what OpenAI can afford to put together. But because all that is going on, there's no, it's not like, well, there's just 3 companies who have any idea what this is and we can force them to stop, or they can all agree to stop. It's just not going to happen. Like this is racing forward. So it is about responsibility, and it's about transparency, I think, very important. And I mean, I think so far I've been relatively pleased with the big companies who all say, quite clearly, like OpenAI is very clear, like this makes stuff up. It's often wrong, and that's really important to understand. And here's how it works, and here's why that happens. And it's good. I mean, it's an interesting balance, obviously, for companies in this kind of situation, because they may have some proprietary advantages that they want to keep a little quiet. Why not? They're trying to create products that are better than the competition, and that's good, and that's fine. At the same time, being as transparent as they can be in a way that helps the public understand what's going on and keeps the public safe, that's obviously a very important thing.
Absolutely. Maybe I could ask you just about your sort of life experience a little bit. I was just thinking, now you've been going 22 years or so. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently as you've progressed through putting the organization together?
I would say yes and no, but I mean, so here's the thing. I always say I'm a pathological optimist, so I always think everything is fine. And so as a result, when I look back at things that didn't work, things we tried that didn't work, or whatever, mistakes we made, I also think, yeah, but I know how we got there, and I know we were we gathered all the information we possibly could. We made the best decision we could in good faith, and we got it wrong. I'm not sure how you can go back and do it better unless you sort of magic up some insight that you couldn't possibly have had. So, for example, before I launched Wikipedia, I had a project called Newpedia, which was the same vision, to create a free encyclopedia for everyone. But I didn't know about wikis and wiki editing. And so we built this 7-stage review process, and it was all about emailing around Word documents and editing, and it just didn't work. And so I could say, gee, wikis existed already at that time. They were very basic and simple. I could have started 2 years earlier. And I wish I did. But then again, when I really think about it, I think, well, you know what we did for those 2 years? On the mailing list, we really talked a lot, and we debated, and we thought up a lot of questions about neutrality and how to structure the data. And it wasn't wasted time, really. It was, in a way, it was good that we didn't just launch right in, because by the time we were able to sort of find the wiki software and get going on a wiki, we already had a good kind of shared vision of where we were going. I mean, that's a bit rose-colored, but it's kind of hard to judge the past and say, oh, yeah, of course I should have done that differently, but I'm not sure I know how I could have. So
that's quite a hearteningly optimistic view, actually. I like that.
Yeah.
What about the future development? How do you see things going in the near-term future for Wikipedia?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I think one of the things is that the website or the app or the way you access Wikipedia, it's not going to radically change. We're not going to suddenly become TikTok of words or something like that. The encyclopedia works, people love it, and the model is working, and the community. So when I think about change in the future, a lot of the change will be invisible to most people. So, when we see really strong growth in the languages of the developing world, then most people don't notice that. I mean, if you speak English and German and French, I'm just making this up, I don't know. I speak English and a bit of Australian. It's quite terrible, but if I weren't watching and paying attention, I wouldn't realize, actually, Swahili Wikipedia is hitting some interesting milestones. Right. It doesn't impact our lives day to day, but it's a huge part of our mission, and our work is growth in those languages. So even though you don't see it, it's exciting stuff that's going on there. The other thing, when we think about the technology, I would say up until very recently, I would have said, I would have talked about things like, improving the editing interface on mobile, even though that's always going to be hard because it's a small form factor, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, like lots of people, I'm very interested in what are the possible implications and opportunities in large language models. I don't believe it's in any way possible for anytime soon for a large language model to just replace the Wikipedia community and start writing Wikipedia entries. Like, that's pretty far-fetched if you really understand how the technology works and the limitations and flaws. But that doesn't mean that it's not useful and interesting. So things like, here's an example. If let's say you have a question in your mind, like, why do ducks fly south for winter? Okay, that's a very common type of question that, well, normally adults don't have it as often as kids do. But kids ask adults, and then you have to kind of fluster your way through it because you barely know. And so you think, I'm going to go look that up. And you go and you look in Wikipedia. But where would that be in Wikipedia? It's probably, there's a general article about ducks. There's probably an article about bird migration. But to get to a really concise answer that's fact-based in Wikipedia, you might have to read 4 or 5 Wikipedia entries or skim them anyway. And so it's not hard to imagine a large language model that can understand that question and then go and find the relevant bits in Wikipedia and give you an answer that answers your question, that's maybe not the exact words of Wikipedia, but paraphrased or whatever, with a link to the article. That seems very well within reach, so that you can then imagine some technical innovation for Wikipedia to say, actually, this new technology, this AI technology, it's not about writing Wikipedia. It can be about helping people access it, helping people sift through it. Here's another example. Back in the day, I published an academic paper called On the Pricing of Index Options When All of the Underlying Assets Follow a Log Normal Diffusion. And it was when I was working in finance, and it was stochastic differential equations and so on. I'm sure if you handed me a copy of the paper today, I can't even read it. But okay, so one big concept in that is Ito's lemma. It's a theorem in stochastic differential equations. Wikipedia has an article about it. I can't understand the article anymore. And so let's say you decided you wanted to learn more about this subject area in math. Well, you could go to Wikipedia and you can start digging around and looking for simpler articles, or you might enter into a dialogue with Wikipedia in the future where you say, I've read this article on Ito's lemma. I don't really understand it very well. what are some of the basic concepts I need to learn first? Can you outline that for me?
Yeah.
And it pulls from Wikipedia and it says, well, you need to know about differential equations, for example. That's an important concept. Do you know about that? No, I don't. Okay, well, here's some articles to read. So you can imagine it as a guide through Wikipedia that can be incredibly powerful at helping people self-educate in new ways that are just, an encyclopedia is not designed to be a textbook. It's not designed to be a tutor, but it could be useful for a textbook, it could be useful for a tutor. And so you can start to see some really interesting possibilities there.
That is really interesting. In fact, it brings us back to Douglas Adams, doesn't it? Because the answer might be 42, but what is the actual question? You work out what the question is, don't you, sometimes?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah. No, there are definitely cases where where you've got a problem or something you want to know, but you don't even know enough to know how to start researching it.
Yeah.
So normally we just give up and I don't know, it's too complicated for me. But actually you probably could learn it, but you just need a little warm hand-holding.
So. Yeah, absolutely. We could give it a name from somebody intelligent, like we'd call it Ask Jeeves. You might have had that already, mightn't we? Yes. Can I ask you, it's been really interesting talking to you today. Thank you so much. I know we haven't got super long, but I'd like to ask you about who your IT inspirations or maybe your inspirations just in society are that keeps you going in the work that you do.
Well, I mean, I'll name one IT and one in society, which is also sort of IT. So Tim Berners-Lee, obviously, who I know. We end up in the same places fairly often, and I just think he's sort of a great technologist, but also someone who's really dedicated himself in a very thoughtful way to thinking about standards and all of that. So he's obviously a great inspiration. And then Larry Lessig, who's the lawyer who created Creative Commons, which is all about the free licensing, which we use Creative Commons licenses at Wikipedia. And he's gone on now. He works mainly on problems relating to money and politics and corruption in the U.S. And that's the focus of his campaigning and work these days, which is a huge problem, obviously. And he's someone who, it's interesting, even from before I ever met him, I used to read his stuff. And what I always said is, I don't always agree with Larry, but I always have to grapple with what he's saying. And I think that's admirable, to say, even if I would come to a slightly different conclusion, he's really thoughtful, and it's really impressive. So
excellent. Two great suggestions. Thank you very much indeed. It's been brilliant talking to you, Jimmy. Can I thank you so much for making the time to speak to us today?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, fantastic.